Spang for them to enlighten us. And then if we have any questions, we'll start there.
Thank you, Mr. Ginelli. Thank you, board members, for joining us this evening. So, I just want to start out by introducing Michelle Sanford to the meeting this evening. She's in charge of grants for the district, and has been an integral part, particularly of not only the transition, but just helping us manage through the various monies that come through the district, and has been very invaluable to us, particularly during this transition. So I want to thank her for her presence this evening. And then, of course, we have Eddie Miranda, of course, our new Deputy of Finance, and of course, our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. John Spang. Let me just start off by thank everyone for joining us again this evening. It was very important for me to have a process in place in which we start to review the monthly financials prior to the board meeting. And so, Mr. J, I just want to thank you, number one, for getting us together and kind of understanding my perspective and just kind of given the last couple of months and how the school year ended. And with all of the various commitments and concerns that we had about the school budget for the 21-22 school year, I thought it was important that we have kind of a monthly discussion before we ask the board to approve the financials for the month. So John and Ed are going to walk us through an exercise. I know he opened with a memo, and then, of course, associated with the memo was also the monthly financials. This will bring us up to date with our monthly financials from here in terms of a process. And if there are no questions, I'll ask John to step in and start to walk us through.
Nope, I just want to thank you for the, organizing this so that it does become more of a discipline, and we as board members know what to expect. Historically in the past, we've had these meetings, sort of helter-skelter whenever it was convenient or stuff like that. But I think, and as I mentioned in the last meeting, a regimentation or a schedule of these meetings are very important, so people know to block that out on their calendar. And so I thank you for doing that.
Well, I hope you and Kathy both enjoy it so much that you'll continue to come back after November.
Yep.
We're ready for you, Mr. Spang.
I know that's tongue in cheek.
No, that is genuine.
Yeah. We're on the second page, not the third page of the ballot.
Yeah.
they call that.
We're the right ends. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Do they call that down ballot? There's a name for that, right?
Something
like that. Yeah.
Has-beens, that's what they call it.
Yeah.
Thank you. So let me just kind of explain how I look at it this time of year and see if we want to, what we might want to adjust for next month. But generally, the first month or two, certainly the first month, what I try, and this is the first month of the school year that we're talking about, and what I try to do is point out what might have changed from the budget that you adopted, but from a perspective of what type of programs and services did we expect to start up and put in place, and are they going, or did it happen, and that kind of thing. And then as the months go on, more of a comparison to were our original budget estimates high or low, or where were they? And then as we get, probably into December, January, start to project what we think things will be come June 30th. It's really, when we've had maybe 20 or 25 days of school out of 180, there's not a whole lot you can say about what's going to happen by June. So a couple of things I point out there in the beginning. We opened in late August with 11,800 students. You heard that, all about that at our regular board meeting a couple weeks ago. There's some additional students in the registration pipeline. I won't get into that. But the total is expected to be over 12,000 students, which is an increase, of course, compared to what we've had. And I also think it's good as we start these meetings to talk about our budget, how big it is, so to speak. So I mentioned there in the second paragraph, and I think the night you adopted the budget, June 8th, is important, and I think it needs to be pointed out that we expected our budget to go up about 4% after all the trimming and reductions were made. Just our current program from last year to this year, and we had 2.4 million of additional funds come from the city, and that became part of our general fund budget. So the general fund budget that we'll be comparing to is $139.5 million. You'll see it there. But there was also an additional 2.2 million that was assigned to the ARP or the ESSER 3 grant. You'll see if you, maybe next month, I'll pull out the spreadsheet again. And I think at the time we weren't quite sure what all the uses could be for the ESSER 3 grant. No one knew at the time. It looked to be as if there'd be quite a bit of flexibility there. So I think we just have to keep our eye on that as we go through the next couple months to remember that some of our operating increase was put there. About 1.6% of the increase was parked over there. As we started the year, of course, everybody is, all the students are back, and the term you'll hear people use is face-to-face, kind of a funny term to use, but compared to a year ago, that was not the case. So it's hard to compare the spending this year with last year because it was just apples and oranges. I think as the year goes on, at least the next few months, you'll see me compare it to 2 years ago, when September, October, November were somewhat similar before COVID gripped and we went with the shutdown. But again, comparing it to last year is going to be, we have to be careful what we do there. So what I like to do early is if something changed compared to what you thought was going to happen, I like to point it out. And one of the big changes, it's a favorable change, is at the high school. We have returned some of the tents that we had there. Originally, we thought we'd be spending $720,000 over the year for tents. And we're gonna, right now, there are just 3 tents there. And we think for the rest of the year project, and Dan Donovan wants to keep them there for different purposes. But we think at the end of the year, that expense will be closer to $400,000. So there's a $320,000 favorable savings there. And then the other thing that's just, it's different compared to other years, of course, is the Danbury Primary Center in Brookfield. So I thought it'd be good just to mention that again. We think the total cost for that could be in the vicinity of $1.7 million. There was a couple $100,000 almost that we needed just to get started there. Yes, we would have had those kindergarten teachers elsewhere, but there's additional busing that goes along with this. I know you know that. Extra administration and some of the support teachers that go along with any school. We had to put some smart boards in the classrooms and some technology that really couldn't come from the sending school. So I thought it's just good to point that out because that's different from what we had a year ago. And then the other thing I think worth pointing out, we were just talking about this when the meeting started, is school lunch and the cost of food. We had Sodexo in last week to talk about a number of things. One of the things I said to them was, if there's any changes in the program, whether it's lower participation, higher participation, food costs higher, whatever it is, I said we need to hear that every month as we go along, so we can certainly report it to you and to the board. If there's a story, and I don't know that there will be, we don't want to know about it come springtime. We want to know about now. I asked them also to talk about the price of food, what they're seeing. They didn't seem as concerned as I was with their costs. They, as we were talking, they have a lot of large bids and large purchasing that they do. So maybe that's enough, but I still think it's good to ask them to what's going on. So maybe we'll hear some more about that one way or another. We're going to watch it very closely, of course, as it goes on. But I think the message is tonight is that all the other programs and services that you planned on are underway, in place. We don't see any significant budget variations right now. So other than what I mentioned, we're off and running. So happy to answer any questions. Sure.
I'd like to start if nobody, oh, go ahead, Kate.
John, I just had a quick question. Can you remind me the approximate cost for the year for a bus?
I don't know it exactly, but I think it's upwards of $70,000 in that vicinity. It's,
Yeah.
Okay, and that
expensive.
includes like the staffing, the fueling and everything, right?
It does.
Okay,
It does.
all right. Thank you so much.
Mhm. And I'd like to say, yep, Al.
Thank you, Rich. John, could you provide me with a rough estimate of number of students we serve with free lunch and the percentage of our students that are on that program?
Right. I can, we'll get you that figure. I can say this tonight. It's a couple of things. And boy, is that a program that has been evolving and changing once the pandemic hit. But when students first came back here and elsewhere last year, at first participation was was much lower. I think parents were a little leery of what we were serving. Was it safe? Was it a place that, more students were bringing their lunches than had previously before the shutdown. But boy, has that changed. What we know so far is participation in September is way up, which is a good thing. And it's not just up here, it's elsewhere. Part of that is because using federal and state funds, everybody this year eats for free, whether they're eligible for free and reduced or not. And the state reimburses us so much per lunch and so much per breakfast. So when it's free, there's more people that do it. Plus, we have a good program, so we could probably get you the number of people that are getting their lunch every day at school and not bringing their lunch, but they no longer have to fill out the applications that they used to with their income and told them whether they were free or reduced. We know that's going to go on for the rest of this year. There's a lot of talk about how do we go back next year and what happens. but it's business is good over there. Kevin, is there anything that you know about the school lunch enrollment that I missed?
Yeah. So John, while you were talking, I actually looked up in our e-grant system, and if I calculated this correctly, it looks like a little over half of our students are eligible based on the state's algorithm for K-12 low income count. And so in our public schools, it looks like a little over 6,300 students are eligible under this algorithm. But I don't want to say that that's definite. I think I'd need this information from Janet to confirm these numbers. But just kind of based on the information we have on the state to help determine Title I eligibility, I have a little over 6,300 students who are eligible under the K-12 low income count.
Thank you.
Okay, historically, for some reason, a number like 68%, I remember looking at last year. I don't know whether that was just the part of the ECS formula coming out for the free and reduced lunch, but it's interesting to know that it's open to everybody at this point. So it makes no difference of what the percentages, were calculated at. I want to backtrack. Michelle, I just want to welcome you. I know you've got a very difficult job. These grants, which include the ESSER monies, are complicated. My biggest concern is that just to make sure we don't miss a window to utilize the funds before the time runs out.
Yes, we definitely don't want to do that.
And if you can, and to everybody, if there's a way that we can develop more reporting on grants. I know our grant budget is large, forgetting the ESSER, but generally it's in the 35, maybe million dollars. We never really focused on any of the grants in detail. We had conversations more in depth on the Alliance grant, which is part of that. But it would be good to start bringing forth some analysis as what these grants are, what they mean. An interesting study would be in Title I money. It's been my impression that our increase since I've been on the board of Title I funds has been nominal versus the number of schools that are now Title I schools from when I first came onto the board. So more information on that we haven't previously had, I think is always good and enlightening, so that it's an education not only to the administration, but also to the, to the board. And John, to your point in making comparisons, yeah, to compare it to the last 2 COVID years is irrelevant because they were really an anomaly. And so any kind of a comparisons, that should be done to quote, whatever we define now as a normal, a normal year. My concern is the big ticket items of what we refer to sometimes as needle movers, basically the health insurance. Last year, we had conversations last week about the contribution to the reserve was due to the health insurance, the lack of expenditures on it due to COVID. Are we seeing, or are you able to see an uptrend this year to a point where, that decrease that we had in the prior 2 years would start to pick up and get to a more of a normal situation as, excuse me, people go out and get their regular checkups, et cetera, but not to a point where it becomes greater than what we budgeted? I mean, I know it's only 3 months into the year, but that would be my concern as a watch item.
Yeah, it's an excellent idea. If I was thinking about that just today, we use a company, Gallagher. They're kind of a combination consultant broker. Most towns and schools do the same thing. When it gets to be close to budget time, they do that for us. They look at the claims per month and they project, and recommend the premium. But to your point, Rich, it's been such an unusual time. I was thinking of asking them to do that now. In addition, they just, there's no extra cost to us for having them do some analysis, but go in, look at the claims. What does it tell them? And of course, what would that mean for us? I don't think it hurts to ask. And I think there's so much uncertainty. It would be good to do. So.
Yeah, I think that's a
Good idea.
The claims you don't know, it's sort of like a crapshoot because it is just based on what comes in and what you get hit. And the timing too, you're getting hit with expenses that may have had for a situation or an occurrence of a couple of weeks, a couple of months ago sometimes, depending on how fast that particular provider processes their paperwork. So again, I think the consultant would be good just to keep you on track as to, where it's heading so that we're pretty safe with the budget, with the budget numbers.
Yeah, and it's an excellent point. And this is what they do, so they look at it, they'll see things that probably we don't. And let's use their expertise. Why not?
So John, I recall when we met with the city, you speaking to how important it was to invite the consultant in at this point. Just strategically, this would be beneficial to the district. But can you also remind the board about our strategy around putting money in the reserves for the questions and concerns Mr. J just raised?
Yep. Yeah. So what that's about is, if you remember, we looked at the reserves 2 weeks ago or last time we met, and of the 10 million, you probably could say one way or another, at least half of that was for health insurance kind of reasons.
Mhm.
And
Right.
what the city felt, and I agree with them, that there was during COVID, there were so many elective surgeries. Maybe that's an oxymoron too, elective surgery, but that were put off for a lot of reasons. We all heard about that, read about that. They feel there might be a pent-up demand there that might artificially increase our claim experience in the next 8 to 10 months. And that rather than trying to dig into premiums or some other reserves that you need for kind of things, that this money that they've set aside would be a good way to smooth that expense. It's kind of a one-time expense. When you think about it, if the money came from lines where it was supposed to pay for surgeries, I'll use a term like a knee surgery, and it didn't, but next year it will, as a person goes in and has it, then why not match that money with what it was for? So the logic, I think, is there. But we'll have to see what the claims look like.
Okay, and one other point is, and Kevin, this is to you, the tents, the use of the tents, are they, I think of one of the board meetings or conversations that you had, you were indicating that because of the large capacity and the safety issue of the tents, you were thinking perhaps not to use those as an eating facility, but then to do some variations to spread out the so-called cafeteria because of the complications of the winter and having all these kids into the tents. So are they still going to use the tents for part of the food serving issues, or is that completely out and it's going to be used for something else?
Right. So the high school has asked to keep a couple of tents because their thought is kids are going to still continue to want to access outside seating no matter how cold it gets. And so as long as the tents are safe and we don't have to worry about wind or snow, I'm happy to oblige and, to allow students to go outside and have a space to sit. We've also ordered a couple of extra round table like benches so we don't have to use classroom furniture when the weather permits in the spring. Hopefully, this will not be an ongoing issue and pour over into the next school year. But they do use some of these savings to purchase some benches for outside seating so that, again, we don't have to use classroom furniture out there. But that's the idea, Mr. J. And then the idea is to just have a couple of tents left over for any outside activities. And for students who on a nice day still want to go outside, they'll at least have a covered space. But then inside the building, we will be using one of the gyms in addition to the cafeteria to spread kids out inside of Danbury High School.
Okay, and one other question would be on staffing, particularly substitutes and then our regular staffing. Are we experiencing a shortage? I guess the best word I can say. Are we experiencing a shortage in these areas of staffing, which are, giving us a favorable, variance going on? But I mean, operationally, it'll also hinder the operation of teaching. Is that how? I guess my question is going to be then, how is your staffing issue regarding of teachers and substitute teachers this year so far?
Unfortunately, it has been a challenge for us, and we are pricing a number of different agencies now to address not only our substitute teaching challenge, but also the same for paras, paraprofessionals, and tutors as well. These are three areas that have been shortages that is not allowing us to address services for students across the district. And then, of course, when there's a substitute, if we have a substitute teacher shortage, that begins a domino impact within our respective buildings because we have a supervision issue. And then we start pulling staff from different places to plug the substitute hole, if you will. So one of the things John and Kim have been looking into on the district's behalf is pricing out the cost of temp agencies for this purpose. My hope is that we can solidify some of these shortage areas with the temp agency. It could be a good way to plug personnel challenges because we're not required or committed, beyond the 1 or 2 year contract. And so we don't have to worry about the financial cliff with those spaces. There is a markup, of course, for those positions where, as an example, a substitute teacher may cost us $100, $110. If we go through the agency, it could be a markup of $25 to $30 extra per substitute teacher. So certainly it would come at as an additional cost, but given our challenges and kind of where we are here in almost November, I think it's worth seeking and seeing if this is a possible solution for us. And then, of course, unfortunately, we have some other challenges with staffing as well because of shortage areas in ESL and our bilingual staffing. And so, and then our new students who have come in the district has been concentrated mostly in our middle school and high school. Dan in the high school has gotten over 200 students since September. And, I know the magic number for budgeting is October 1st, but we kind of smiled at John today when talking about the October 1 numbers. And, we still have another 200 plus students in the queue in registration because, they continue to just register in the school district. So, that's also a reality, but we are finding this year, particularly in these last couple of months, the high school numbers are continuing to increase.
Could you say whether the shortage in substitutes is due to less people participating or wanting to work, or is it, or maybe it's a combination of a competitive rate that we're paying with other districts? I know in the past we've gotten creative and not so much creative, but we've gotten creative in terms of long-term subs, giving them some benefits or incentives to make a commitment to stay. And on the regular substitutes, I think we went from a lower rate to, I want to say $90 or $95 to maybe something a little higher. I don't recall the exact numbers, but is there any one obstacle, or is it a combination of those two plus more that's creating this problem?
Right. And I'm not sure all of the challenges. I can tell you, we don't have as many folks in the pool this year. despite our recruitment efforts, despite the numbers in the pool that we've had years previously, we do not have the same numbers and folks even just available to sub as we've had in previous years.
Okay, and this
Can I
agency, Yep, I'm sorry, let me finish.
I'm sorry, Rich.
Okay, my last question. Would the agency, is this a type of agency that specializes in substitutes where they would do the background checks for him? All that?
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
would.
they would, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Kate, go ahead, sorry.
No problem. Mr. Wilson, I just wanted to kind of follow up on that, in terms of hiring a staffing company, what costs are there to us? Would we only see fees if we actually get hires?
I will ask John for a little help on that. We actually just received a proposal from 2 different companies, which has been 300 plus pages from both organizations. So I went
paperwork.
straight to the second to last page to look at the price, which is the part that I quoted about the markup per sub. But I'm not aware of the entire commitment in terms of, is this a 1 year or 2 year commitment? The things I'm most interested in, Kate, is, what is the cost per sub, number 1? And then 2, if they're with us for a year and then we want to fold them into our operations, does that come at an additional cost? So those are some things I'm trying to get clarification on now, but John may have some answers to those other questions.
Usually, it's really just a price per day per sub for the positions they fill. There's a half day option in there. You get them for either a half day or a full day. And as Kevin pointed out, there's a markup for the company expenses. Generally, there's not a penalty for hiring people later after the year, but we'll make sure of that. So,
Okay.
and again,
thanks.
they're companies that specialize in this and are in other districts around us.
Yeah, and that was kind of where I was going, is that, if there are not a lot of additional costs involved here, if we're just looking at that additional, that markup, this might be a very viable solution for us, because I know other districts are really having the same struggle. So,
Right. They gained popularity from the Affordable Care Act when employers found that if people had worked for a certain period of time continuously, they might have to offer them health insurance coverage under the Affordable Care Act. So schools, towns, et cetera, they just, they'd rather move that liability onto a contractor than have to keep it themselves. So the last couple of years, they've grown.
Also, Kate, when you look at the differential, and what they're charging, it also decreases our labor, our participation, thinking of Kim and her staff, have to deal with this, and the amount of time they have to spend, on this stuff on a daily basis to do all that work. The small differential when you include our cost in it versus the actual differential for what they're charging. To me, sometimes it's nominal, and you pick up all the efficiencies in the personnel department or the HR department that they can do on, getting their job done, instead of wasting a lot of their time on a specific crisis to put out the fire.
yeah, I tend to agree with you, Rich. But the other thought I have in the back of my head, of course, is if we're willing to mark this up to pay somebody else to find subs, would we be better off perhaps making our sub price more competitive? But I understand that could have repercussions for other contracts that we're operating. So,
But, and there could be other offsetting savings too. I think doing this way through an outside agency, they're not on your payroll. And so it's something that John and Eduardo and Kevin will assess. But, I always look at things in terms of the loss of the manpower that we're doing, taken away from truly what our objective is at the end of the day, which is to educate and keep this district moving, rather than spend a good part of our efforts in putting out these fires. So it's sort of a cost and reward basis. Are there any other questions? Generally, before I don't want to conclude too quickly, but the conversations building around the first 3 months of financials, as John said, it's I don't want to say meaningless. It's good to have, But I think when you get to a 6-month point of view, it gives you a better, not so much a trend line, but a better feel for where you're going. And then you could have a better assessment as to make adjustments, going forward, unless you see something really that's an anomaly in the first couple of 3 months that, really becomes a watchdog item, so to say. But other than that, if the more that you come out with and clean up, I say clean up in a positive sense. I don't mean any derogatory thing that was done in the past, but make easier the presentations so that the board and the public understands them. My feeling is you'll have more participation in your meetings. That would be perhaps more productive because it gets down to the layman understand what you're talking about. And again, that the looking at those 100 line numbers on a financial report, it is horrendous. I mean, that, whoever designed that report has got to be nuts. But, as I said last time, if you could focus in on keeping it cleaner so that when you submit it, it has some meaning. And as I mentioned, I think it was Eduardo today, at least on a heading, if you could have another line put in there so it indicates what period of time we're talking about. Because lots of times I've had to go back and look at financials and they weren't labeled on the top as to the 3-month ending or the 6-month ending or 5-month ending. So I had to go back and look at the board minutes that the attachments was there to determine what period I'm looking for. So at the very least in the heading, if you could indicate what period of time, that would certainly be, a helpful, and then work with the provider if they can clean that thing up so that when you do show it to board members, you don't really lose them because they tend to think people get lost in all that array of numbers, even to try to recap it to your summary that you give. And I like your summary and I like your top level summary as to the high points. I think that's good. And, those are good starting points. So we're off to a good, I think you're off to a good start.
Thank you.
Hey, I think Kate had a question.
I did have one more question. Thank you, Mr. Wolston. I just wanted to talk really quickly about the ESSER funds, because I know that, per your cover letter here that, 2.25 million is coming from the ESSER 3 grant that came through. So can I just get a sense of, for the ESSER 2 funds, are those spent at this point and that's done? Or is that, because I know that that's also a multi-year grant. So I just want to get a sense of sort of how that's fitting in as well.
Kevin, you want me to answer that or would you?
Yes, I think both of us can. And I will just start with Kate. We made we made a 3-year commitment with the ESSER funds. Some of that funding included a project manager for before the high school that was actually to be paid out of ESSER 2, interventionist and para support throughout our schools. I think we budgeted for almost 18 paras across the district. Curriculum, and then we also budgeted curriculum development, EL Achieve, and expansion for our EL program, and that was not a big number. It was like $50,000, between the two. But then also EL Achieve, which is new curriculum, that was $125,000. And then we also budgeted over $300,000 for, I'm sorry, the $350,000 was for EL Achieve. And so that was a sizable budget items under curriculum. But then we also had the family liaisons, a number of them committed in ESSER 2. Parent Square, the paying of Parent Square and getting that up and running at $51,000. So the answer to your question, the answer is no, the monies are not done. But a lot of the commitments that we made were kind of training or curriculum updates. Orton Gillingham was $150,000. PSYOP training for staff was $140,000. Illustrative math training, which is a new math curriculum that we're bringing into the district, was $14,000 and $12,000 respectively. And then we had the classrooms, and this is, when I say the classrooms, this is for part of the rental. I believe this is for Brookfield, adding classrooms and facility rental. We have over $700,000 in commitments that we made. And the buses, it looks like we paid for our buses. That was over, for the 10 additional buses. That was over $700,000 commitment as well. And so in terms of it being done, I would say it's not done. The commitment is, but we have committed those dollars over the next few years. I think in between all of those items, there may be an opportunity for some savings in between some of those budget lines. But this group might recall some of the commitments we made in those presentations around ESSER 2 in the first year, and then ESSER 3 in the second year. ESSER 3 in the second year was the one where we did the big community engagement sessions. We were getting feedback from the community plus the staff to inform that last plan. But I just thought I'd take that opportunity to just kind of refresh everyone about some of the commitments that we made. And John, before you jump in, I heard Mr. Gianelli speak to earlier, maybe we can have some type of presentation or update on some of the grants. And I think it will be important for us, kind of separate from our operating budget, to share maybe a biannual, at the very least, update on CARES, ESSER 2 and ESSER 3, just to give the school community an idea of how these monies, just remind everyone, number one, how we committed these monies, two, our progress or lack thereof, just in terms of what has been spent down and not spent down. I think there's going to be a need for us to repurpose some of these dollars very soon. So, for example, the board might recall the commitment, the commitment we made to the tents for the high school as an example. And now, you just heard from John officially that, there's, potentially an over $300,000 savings from the high schools. There's an opportunity to repurpose those monies and invest back into our schools. So I think we're going to find that along the way. That's going to happen throughout. And I think a biannual, at the very least, update, I think would be appropriate.
Thank you, Kevin. I think that's very important because it's a lot of money that we're starting to see. And as I said before, historically, when we talked about grants, it was talked in just global total numbers. And we were focusing more recently on the Alliance part of the grant, but there are so many different grants we have, and people are not, I say people, board members, are not really aware of what the grant means or what it provides to us, other than it's in the combination of a total of X number of dollars that the Board of Ed receives as grants. So, that's another area where you can pursue and again, bring that to light, is to more of an educational process for the board, as well as interested participants. Are there any other questions that any of the committee members have? Okay, Mr. Russo.
Just a thought. I want to thank Mr. Walson for saving us $300,000 tents. Great idea utilizing the gymnasiums, spread things out a little bit. That still leaves $400,000. I was wondering, are there any other strategies of social emotional mitigation we could use to eliminate those tents and put additional part of that encumbered $400,000 to use elsewhere?
Yes, well, hopefully we won't need the tents at all, and maybe by the spring, the COVID people and all who are in charge of making these kind of recommendations will say it's okay, and we don't have to worry about social distancing, and that would be the easiest way to save the monies for sure. We're in as everyone in this call knows, we're in a unique situation because we have so many kids at the school, and we just don't have the capacity to have all of these kids sitting in the gym and sitting in the cafeteria. The good thing, Mr. Russo, is when the weather warms up again, our kids will be able to be outside for PE. Our kids will be able to go outside, and we may or may not need the tents right away in April, because the sun, it's not as if the sun is beaming down on us. until April and May, so there may be an opportunity, there may be a cost savings there. But more importantly, we've budgeted for tents for 3 years because we had to not know, it's kind of unknown. So I think the good news for the board and for the school community is this potentially could be a considerable savings for us if in a 22-23 school year and beyond, we do not have to budget for tents at all. And quite frankly, I'm certainly hoping we do not, so we can reinvest those monies into supporting our kids, which is, and address some of these other issues that we're continuing to face since we returned to school.
Thank you. Great idea in using the gymnasium.
Yeah, thank you, sir. That's the school. I gotta give the school credit. They found the space in the building.
Mhm. Good. Is there, because of COVID, is there still a reluctance about visiting the 2 new schools, the Brookfield location as well as the Granville location? Do you think, I mean, many of the board members haven't seen those, and I was just wondering if in the near future you could put that on the agenda. I think it might be interesting, to see what those locations look like.
Yes, and frankly, I think both sites would be great to bring to board. Obviously, the one right here in town is even easier and more accessible because it's right around the corner from Ellsworth on Granville Avenue. And of course, if there are no students there, there's even less risk for our school community. So if we were to schedule something right after school, or on a day off, like Veterans Day, for example, we can go into the school during a professional development session. And absolutely, Mr. J, it's a great idea. I think it's time, given that we've been meeting in person, getting a walk through both of the facilities and getting the feel of all of the hard work that our facilities department has been doing over the last 2 years. I think would be good for the board to see, particularly given the commitment we've made to both of those facilities.
Sure, thank you. And I
So,
think, certainly,
if the board is interested, I will certainly work on it.
taking into account your safety precautions, I can envision each of the board members holding a long rope 6 feet so that they stay 6 feet apart, be like in the circus, the elephants, following each other. All right. Are there any other questions before Mr. Russo? Oh, wait, you're paying attention tonight there, Mr. Russo. Good.
Good to see you smiling, Richard. Just a thought. Are there any opportunities with our transportation scheme for savings? Number one, and number two, it's been a while since transportation has gone out for bid. And would that be advantageous to us?
We just
Yeah.
renewed a contract, if I'm not mistaken, pardon me, last year, I thought we renewed the contract with,
How long is that?
last year, we renewed the contract. It was a board meeting that said we weren't going to go out to bid, if I'm not mistaken, and we renewed the contract with STA.
We did renew, and we renewed at a savings.
Right.
I don't remember how many years it's for, Mr. Russo, so we can find out and report out, perhaps at our next meeting. But by renewing with them, we did find a savings by renewing with them. And I can get those specifics for us for our next meeting. I believe it has something to do with the 10 buses that we've just added on.
Right.
And some of those buses were literally at no cost for the first year. But I will get some specifics on that plan. And if I heard the second part of your question, was that about how things are going with bus? And I heard one about the cost of buses. And
Is there any opportunity for saving additional funds under our current contract?
Okay. And what we can do, I can ask John and Ed for some help on this and see if we can get maybe a comparison to what we're paying and get an idea of, and see how that compares to what other school districts are paying, just so we can have an idea and get a side-by-side comparison and just see how we're doing. Given our contractual obligations right now, at least we can see how we're paying and what that looks like versus, some of our districts like Stanford and Norwalk, who some of our similar sizes.
And our current contract that was renewed, and do we just check in, well, how long that contract will be running?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And off the top of my head, Al, I want to say that I forget the contract. I want to say 3 years, but don't hold me to it. And the savings are somewhere between, from memory, anywhere between 500 to 700,000. And the savings were occurring in the first couple of the years of the contract. This is only from memory, but when they pull up the files, that'll be, they can show you that. But there was a savings, a significant savings to us, and that was the reason that the determination was made to pursue it with this company and not go out with the bid, since we had this, since we had experience with them as well as potential savings. We didn't want to lose that window of opportunity to, for any increased costs. But again, I'm only talking from memory. So.
And you've got a great memory, Rich.
Yeah, thanks.
It's gonna miss you, buddy.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to miss all this. I really enjoy this, and I would, the sad part is with all of the updating, I'm going to call that, of the schedules and the financials, which is stuff I love to do, that I wouldn't have an opportunity to be part of it there. But I think that, to me, that's the fun of financing, is to how to make the numbers talk and talk to other people who are not as interested in all the details, but yet from what you're providing them, have an understanding of what you're putting across, and then you could back it up with all of the laborious details. But there's certainly a lot of stuff on their plate that, is going to be new and inventive and creative stuff that the board has never had before. And I think that's also interesting. And, certainly a time, if time has passed, that we haven't had that stuff. So again, I'll say it again this time, as I said last time, I'm going to miss this. And I thank you all for your working with you. I certainly enjoyed it. Kathy and I have worked together and been on a finance committee. I think each of us have been on them since inception. So, and she's always been the secretary. And I always ask her, please, to take the minutes, which I thank her for.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's been a good run, and I wish you all good luck. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
All right, guys. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
6:50.
So moved.
Yeah, before we adjourn, Mr. Janelle, could I just sort of ask a question? Could we go back to free and reduced lunch? And maybe I need to understand this just a little bit better. My understanding that all our schools are on free and reduced lunch. And I can remember back at a meeting that all our schools were on Title IX that were on free and reduced lunch. And we had 3 schools, the high school, West Side Academy, and AIS, that those schools were on free and reduced lunch, but there's still application that goes out to those parents that want to put their kids on free and reduced lunch. So the applications are still out there, because I was with a parent last week that her children had application to apply for free and reduced lunch. So we need to be clear as to what we're saying when we're saying parents don't have to fill out the application, because they do.
Okay. All right, thank you. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Kate made the motion, I'll
sorry.
second it.
Thank you, Kathy. So,
Okay.
so moved, and we'll see you all on Wednesday. Again, thank you very much. Have a good
Good
night,
night.
everybody.
Thank you. Good
Absolutely.
night.
See you
Thank
then.
you
Have a
for
good
your
night,
time.
everybody.
Yep, bye.